Viva la Evolution. Hello everyone, it is Mike Levin. Wednesday, October 16th, 2019 at around noontime, and I am out on my lunch break. And I am here at just about Times Square, 7th Avenue and Fashion Avenue. And I am in no rush to hop back onto the subway, having run out to a laptop repair shop to show them my Surface Book Pro 2 that I need to get a little repair on. And they're ordering the part, and the repair will be done in about a 3-hour window tomorrow. I paid half up front, and I'll pay half after the repair. A lot of noise. Welcome to New York City. Just to show you how resistant I am to editing, I will just walk faster to get out of that bad audio area and continue. This is like broadcasting live, so I might as well start YouTube live broadcasting, because even though I'm just walking along holding my phone, this is what I'm doing essentially. I'm very comfortable with a non-edited, one take, as if I'm doing it live sort of video session. Even when I'm walking down Times Square, New York City, go into a different subway entrance, because after successfully getting my laptop repair quote, and I still have it with me here, by the way, so I don't have to part with it even for the day while they get the part, because I had stopped in and paid the half up front. And it's Laptop MD, and I found them in Google, and so I am an SEO, a search engine optimizer, so I very much respect the business that they have going here. Getting the will order a part, and once it's here, 1-day turnaround. You find us by searching on certain keywords in Google, and as long as your site is optimized and you're doing a good job, and you got, I guess they're calling it EAT, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness, as long as you have those 3 things going for you, based on all the various signals that could be getting emitted all over the internet, your content will be served high. So a place like that probably has a fair amount of validity from press releases and interviews they've collected, all the types of testimonial and, used to be press quote clipping done by an entrepreneurial company to make sure they're best. They're here right in Midtown Manhattan, and they couldn't survive in this environment if they didn't have a couple of things going for them: a decent price, a easily found presence, and sort of pulling in from a big population base that is New York City. So I'm having that experience, and figured, how often am I here in the Times Square area? I'll just walk a little bit to my destination instead of hopping right on the subway. I'll go a few stops and get on the next subway entrance, because that way I get to walk through the tourists and see a few things while I do my talking to you about next steps career-wise. So, typical me, I will do a video like this, talk about some local business, happens to be local to here in New York City, so it may apply to a few people, but then I'll transition directly into what I'm doing with myself and my field and my career here on my continuing quest to always be focusing on the right things, be they, and there are these 2 categories really. There's old school, in which case you are doing things with Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, the old school platform, even though things like Git aren't even really that old, but a text-based terminal, Unix shell, leaning experience where everything can be done by asking for just a Linux login to that computer, be it cloud as infrastructure as a service, IaaS, or be it a Raspberry Pi running out of your own home, or shortly, one of these home media center servers that are really Linux boxes that you can configure and use as your own little server to run scheduled things under Linux, a daemon. So I'll be setting up one of these media servers in the next few days because I have a shelf set up, to set up. I just ordered it over Amazon, so it will be getting here very shortly, and I think I am walking the wrong way. In my continuing quest to show you how much I resist editing, I indeed have been going uptown trying to catch the next 1 train instead of walking downtown. So, classic New York faux pas. I should have noticed it sooner, but oh, how well this does apply. So I go from, the search experience that I actually had, how I am engaged. You always need to be, I used to always say, you have to have some skin in the game to be a true SEO, to really know what's going on. And so that applies from both sides. Not only should you usually have something like at least a WordPress blog out there whose analytics you can look at, on which you can test different tools, for which you could test different migration processes if you're switching it from, say, one WordPress host to another. So there's a whole bunch of possible directions you can go when you do this sort of search engine optimization and want to have skin in the game. Most people stop with something like their own WordPress blog. I have a few other things going on which ensure my maintaining of this one quadrant, this old school quadrant called Linux. I have a sort of distribution of Linux, which is really just a 60 megabyte download that uncompresses into about it's a 20 megabyte download that uncompresses into about a 60 megabyte installation, which will run a genuine text-only Linux configured as a basic web server on your desktop. Whether that desktop is, if you're on Windows, it works. I'm keeping myself on Windows 10 these days, and it always tests out well. Or whether you're on Macintosh, whenever I have access to a newer Mac, or occasionally on my slightly older MacBook Airs, I test to make sure Linux is still running from the desktop of a Macintosh, and it also runs from the desktop of Linux. So you can do this trick of getting your own little Linux server that you can terminal serve into, that you can use the old school command line to get into and do a few basic things, and you can configure it to service you however you like. And I also have a project called Pipulate, which while I'm developing it in Jupyter Notebook, and that gets to the other quadrant I'll be talking about, well, 2 sections, they're not really quadrants. There's old school, which I'm helping to promote through the concept of Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, the 4 tools, which together will always keep you relevant and somewhat obsolescence proof, because underneath everything somewhere there is always a little Linux server because of various licensing reasons, and the critical mass of open source has surpassed Microsoft as the operating system where you run your code preference of choice for people making anything new, because who's going to pay the Microsoft licensing fee for X number of 1,000 instances of the software when all you want to do is run your code to scale. So there's a lot of running of Linux so that you can instantiate more instances of a computing unit, a server usually. Sometimes they cluster and give you more collective computing power in various parallel processing scenarios. But for the most part, all you need is a place for your code to run. And that takes one processor, very often an x86, more often an ARM processor. And Python as a language is written for all these platforms and forever will be, and is even in platforms embedded, like put in ahead of time, for specifically to automate the process of whatever device it's installed into. So there's that aspect of Python, but even if you're not using things that host their own Python, you can always set up a server somewhere to run your code. I'll be doing a home media server. It could be a Raspberry Pi Zero for $5, and you never have to pay that money. Oh, here I am walking past that noise. This is right where I came out of the this is where I made my turn. So bear with me. See, on the Android video app, when I was on the Note 8 for my day-to-day phone use, I could have paused the shooting of the video as I walked through this stretch. But, you know, this is what I'm choosing to do on my lunch break, and so I'll pick one entrance somewhere coming up soon and wrap up this video there. But I wanted to capture this unique experience because, you know, it really got me to thinking about the tools I use and how much I am attached to a particular hardware instance, even though my warning always is don't. I fell in love with Amiga hardware. I thought technology was never going to be love-worthy again once the Amiga computer was off the scene. Child of the 80s, early 90s. And the Amiga really lost its lead and became obsolete. And die-hard zealots like myself have clung on to it, if not in actual hardware, then in running Amiga emulator things, and in spirit. A lot of people still in their hearts sort of just love the Amiga computer. And technology has advanced so far, so fast, that now things like the Pixel 4 are being advertised on the digital signage, which was my starting out of my career so many years ago, coming out of college when I was, I guess, 21 in 1991, I would believe that is, or 92 I graduated college. So in 1992 I was doing digital signage. That was well before the web hit. And so this whole thing called the web came along, sitting on the internet. I already used the internet through the Commodore VAX, because I worked for Commodore, the CBM VAX. I always had an account on there and was always able to connect to the internet and do internet things like IRC. And even when I didn't have that, there was FidoNet. I participated in a number of these by telephone bulletin board public internet type systems. And so everything that's happening these days, I'm seeing the second or the third coming of, right down to, you know, what was public domain software in my day is free and open source, but it encapsulates very much of the same spirit. And I see Microsoft making all these similar, amazingly well-designed moves along all these different fronts to keep corralling a person like me back into their fold, as much as I like to hate Microsoft. So this is the other side of things. So whereas I said Linux, Python, Vim, and Git for the old school approach, I also say use today's power tools for what they're worth, because so much of what we build is really just for the next few years. So what you're trying to avoid is a deep learning curve into things that close you in on the long term. So unfortunately, with software as a service, with It's not just software as a service, it's platform as a service. Yeah, really got to be careful. Oh, there's some sort of rally coming up. Well, that'll be fun to walk past. I'm going to just keep powering through this and finish up the concept that I want to get across in this video. First, I'm going to keep doing my thing and fighting obsolescence in my way, keeping myself valuable in the marketplace by always being engaged in the right things for the right reason. One of those right things is an old school package that I bundle Linux, Python, Vim, and Git together. And you don't have to know everything Linux because that's a huge topic in itself. But you basically got to know enough to get your software running under a wide variety of conditions. So if they say, here's a login, and you have yourself a Linux terminal or a Unix terminal, the next thing you do will come natural to you. And you can get your software, probably a .py file, running on a scheduled basis on a standard Linux server. There are many alternatives to this in platform as a service. Things like Google Cloud Platform, scheduled cloud functions. So on the Google Cloud Platform, you can write these cloud functions that can be called like web pages. You're making your own API, your own service. You're making your own little service that works through the receiving and usually sending out of JSON objects. So the thing it is designed to receive is a small request, and the thing that would be emitted out is usually a large JSON object that was just grabbed from a NoSQL database. And Google is offering this and a lot more, call it for free, under your normal Gmail account, and it would take the place spiritually in a bunch of places where you would typically use the Amazon S3 data store. So I have declined to take on projects that have had a certain tech liability that you don't want to incur, because before you know it, you're a DBA, you're a database admin, and then you have two jobs. And are you ready to undertake the stress and the being on the hook 24/7 for the live data? If it's a lot of data and it's incurring data management issues that are really, a characteristic of large data projects. Where are you going to store it? How long are you going to keep it? When you start getting rid of it, are there processes that you want to do, like building smaller databases or indexes, and maybe keep the indexes in a small sample? And those small samples can be aggregate functions for time periods. So you can keep data very efficiently long-term, given just a tiny bit of reliable long-term storage of the sort that Google is making available for free. If you're not using it for large-scale applications. If you need it to scale, that's when you start to pay. So if you're building a little intranet and that intranet needs all sorts of functions and you don't even want to touch a server, you don't want to have to maintain or host or anything, just use the Google Cloud Platform. And if you want it to be really easy and to sort of put you on rails starting out building a mobile application, then you use Firebase, which sits on and greatly relies upon Google Cloud services, the Google Cloud Platform. But Firebase can insulate you from a lot of the more technical configuration work that you would need to do. So there's always a cost somewhere, right? So Google's going to give it to you for free in the hopes of closing you in to a proprietary cloud-based system that will keep you on them for as long as that app exists. But if you're thinking scrap and rebuild, what does it matter if it's not on your own servers and if it's leaning on all these Google free services? If by the time stuff goes wrong, like you're trying to store too much data, the thing has served its purpose and is ready to be maybe implemented some other way, or the company now decides it'd like to take it in-house and off of your personal Gmail account, and it's really a fairly brilliant strategy and falls under that second quadrant of if there's a power tool to be used and to benefit you in your day-to-day process, use it. You can't use everything. There's only so much time in the day. You really can only do so many things. And I see the next subway entrance, which is why I'm slowing down here. I don't want to make my lunch break too long. I'm going to get back to the office and knock out a project in just configurations within Google Sheets using Supermetrics. So the entire project from beginning to end, including things one would call programming, take place inside Google Sheets because we're paying for a product that takes its own configuration from tabs within Google Sheets and carries out the instructions carried therein. And there are a lot of giving things permission. There are a lot of this is allowed to access that going on because it's cloud built on cloud. You're using Google Cloud Services, which G Sheet is really built on top of, and you're using somebody else's cloud service to connect into your configurations and to make the metadata area around your configuration file twinkle and change. In fact, you can have them in two separate Google Sheets where you keep your configuration files here and all the stuff it manipulates is in some other spreadsheet with a different document key. And it has come down, my mandate has been to use this product since it has certain advantages and it offloads the automation piece to someone else who's on the hook for that 24/7. So when you want, the benefit of things always running and nothing can go wrong really except in your configuration files and things in your data that might break the processy, that as long as you've done all your in-spreadsheet programming, and it gets really weird here because there's also AppScript at play here through which you could actually do embedded JavaScript programming and process automation inside G Sheet. So there's also JavaScript APIs that give you pretty high resolution control over formatting in Google Sheet, which would move the thing of template creation, which always I figured I'd do by hand, into the possible realm of automation. So all these possibilities start to begin to open when you just accept you're going to be paying somebody for something, and you're going to be using proprietary tools. You're going to be lured into platforms, but part of that lure is the ease of using it and the barrier to entry just being that low and the cost that cheap, that it's inevitable you're going to use these things that lure you into these platform as a service situations. Some of your knowledge and know-how is going to become tied to, dependent on that platform. But you can get away with that by also taking on a general Linux, Python, Vim, and Git education. And so I'm going to be pushing forward on both of those fronts, maybe making a little tech book. Finally, I'm 49 years old and I have so much to say. Give me a topic and spew, I'll just go on forever. That there's no reason I shouldn't be collecting it and formatting it and working my very SEO magic on it to make my own personal content work for me and to keep myself sharp, learning and using Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, learning and using platform as a service, and to a lesser degree, infrastructure as a service offerings. So I teach you real hardware here. I do some projects with servers, Raspberry Pis, and over on this side, I do some completely and entirely cloud-based things, sometimes using Google Cloud Platform and sometimes using infrastructure as a service, so you'll be dealing with it like there's a real Linux server there. And give you this general, tech education where you'll be able to survive and always be relevant and always be able to offer at least one solution to the problem in the 80-20 rule spirit, where you could always put something together. There's enough services out there that tie into Python, for which Python has client libraries, and sometimes you can just pip install these things. that your know-how will be relevant for a very long time. We're talking maybe 20 years into the future. And the Pandas package for database-like manipulation of data is one of those packages. The matrix processing, a lot of stuff that sort of sets you up for the next step after that, which will be machine learning, and I'll talk a little bit about that. What you can do with the regular hardware you might own, what kind of kooky Raspberry Pi type machine learning type hardware is out there. NVIDIA has one for $100. It's kind of interesting. What your options in the cloud are for, burst processing of, GPU-like resources to take care of working your way through a batch process that you may have laid out in Jupyter Notebook. So even Jupyter Notebook sometimes comes into play with things like machine learning. It's a good place to start because it has scikit-learn pre-installed. So Jupyter Notebook holds this sort of honorary place between the worlds of old school because it's just a web browser. And you got Python in a web browser, and you got scripts that'll port pretty easily between platforms, like my Linux thing back in the day, or my Levinix thing back in the day was designed to do. And you've got something that will set you up for next step automations, which might be in Microsoft's Azure stuff, because they have all kinds of things they're teaching you how to do that tie Visual Studio, the free and open source version of their visualstudio.net, in a Jupyter Notebook-like way to carry out all your Pandas data frame experimentation. I'll take you there. This is the stuff I'm going to be focusing on in a pragmatic way for people who are really trying to do the data automation, the process automation tricks that matter. Automating Chrome using the Puppeteer library, to a lesser degree the Pypeteer library from Python, from Jupyter Notebook. To keep myself sharp, to always be investing in myself, to always be learning, to be mostly on a Python-like environment and thinking mind state, but occasionally to venture into JavaScript because there's no getting away from it. So anyway, there you have it. That's what's on my mind. Getting my laptop fixed, walking through the middle of the Emerald City, about to get on the subway, and my next steps in my career, keeping myself sharp. So I'm going back there now to do a Supermetrics project. I got some Python Pandas database-like work coming up after that, a bunch of pivots I'll be doing. And if I just keep being able to do more and more and achieve that 10 years or 10,000 hours level of expertise and mastery, this is, I can cross over if it's not right uptown, downtown. I don't want to make that mistake. I already used enough time here, but this is downtown, and that is in fact what I want here in the one subway entrance. So I'll wrap up there, and I'll be back at work applying what I have recently researched and know how to do better, because life begins at 49. I have a lot of good to bring, and I think this is one of the videos in a series where I start to corral my random thoughts together into a more logical, maybe more long-term video series. So thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon, and don't forget to subscribe.